Hello everybody, and welcome back once again to Gazagoju YT. And today, we are back with the second episode of Imperatyrannus sanguinis versus the most powerful theropod hybrids in the Great Hybrid War. Now, in case you haven't watched the first episode, click off and go watch it now before coming back to this one. But for those who did watch it, let's not waste any more time and get straight to the fun stuff. First off, we have Shredder, the king of max bleed builds amongst theropod hybrids. Ranging in weight between 11 and 13 tons, this Giganotosaur hybrid relies on speed and agility to flank his opponents before targeting their vulnerable regions, using his blade-like serrated teeth to slice through them with ease, and his toxic saliva from the Komodo dragon to cause intense bleeding that would drain the opponent's energy and grant Shredder an easy victory. However, against Vigo, he is gonna have certain difficulties. 1. Vigo is much bigger, heavier, and has far greater reach than Shredder, meaning that by using his tail alone, especially considering that Shredder is far more lightweight than Vigo, and is also labeled by his creator as an obligate biped, this means that one strike from that tail might be enough to knock Shredder out of balance, leaving him in a compromised position for Vigo to finish him off. 2. Let's say that Shredder did actually manage to make it to Vigo's legs and put his max bleed strategy to play. Well, that strategy does have a bit of loopholes in it. Namely two. The first one being the teeth, as the primary contributor to the sharpness of those teeth is the tiger shark, which has double serrations in its teeth, which provide extremely sharp cutting edges which are highly effective at slicing through prey. Well, at least that's what the creator thought. As while yes, the serrations do certainly help, the primary contributor to the sharpness of those teeth is the fact that tiger shark teeth don't have any enamel in them at all. That's why the incisors of the vampire bat, which also don't have any enamel in them, are so effective at slicing through the skin of animals many times larger than itself in order to reach out to the bloodstream. So in essence, while Shredder's teeth are highly effective at slicing anyway, they're nowhere near as effective as tiger shark teeth. The second loophole being the toxins, as while the toxic saliva of the Komodo dragon is no laughing matter, the potent immune system and rapid blood clotting capabilities of the Black Cayman, coupled with the fact that Vigo is significantly larger than Shredder, makes it to where these toxins are going to be quickly put to a pause. And thus, Shredder now has no reliable means of mortally wounding my hybrid. In contrast, Vigo is much bigger and more muscular than Shredder, which allows him to quite easily overpower him and knock him out of balance the moment he lands a solid hit on him, before quickly finishing him off and pulling off his first victory in this episode. Next up is Hank 3.0, which quite frankly is pretty much the same as Shredder except that he has more muscular arms for grappling, which really wouldn't help him all that much considering that Vigo is still a lot larger than him, and so my hybrid would still be able to pull off a win very easily. Up next we have now a 14-ton Tyrannosaur equivalent of a bodybuilder, being incredibly strong and bulky while still retaining surprising amounts of speed and agility. With heightened intelligence, decent stamina, and solid offensive and defensive capabilities, she's a very well-rounded combatant. However, she's also a rather stereotypical type of theropod hybrid, and like many who preceded her on that trend, Vigo can quite easily leverage his superior size and reach to keep her at bay long enough for him to reposition his body more appropriately in order to confront her, before quite easily overpowering her and knocking her down to the ground and finishing her off with a bite to the neck. The next opponent my hybrid will have to go up against is the Crimson Jaw, which is basically Cronus from the first episode except bigger, now being comparable to Vigo in terms of mass, as well as being more well armed and armored. However, the Crimson Jaw does have his own drawbacks, such as being even slower and more sluggish than my hybrid, in addition to suffering from potential thermoregulatory issues. And so, Vigo can quite easily pull off a win by playing a battle of attrition, utilizing his superior reach to prevent the Crimson Jaw from getting too close, and by the time he's exhausted, my hybrid can quite easily lunge in and bite down on the skull, using his large teeth to penetrate the shingleback skink's facial scales, all while the Indian cobra venom takes care of the rest, given that its neurotoxins and cardiotoxins are so potent that not even the Virginia opossum's immune system can handle them. And ironically enough, the Crimson Jaw does utilize the Virginia opossum for the immune system, and so the Indian cobra toxins should make light work of the Crimson Jaw's immunity responses, making their way to the brain where they would damage it to the point of no return, either killing it right away or basically making it entirely incapable of fighting, allowing Vigo to maul him to death. Moving on, we have Eliab, which is basically Trajan from the first episode, but better, being pretty much physically superior in nearly every single way, while also having superb stamina and intelligence. However, its offensive and defensive capabilities are arguably its biggest downfall, considering that while its arms and claws will prove rather troublesome for my hybrid Vigo, its bite not so much, as while it is strong, the shortened snout will give it a smaller gape, which will make it more impractical to use against a large hybrid like mine. As for the armor, the alligator guard scales are less extensive than what's typically seen in other hybrids like Trajan and Set from the first episode, with the chainmail-like scales from the Komodo dragon filling in the blanks. And while this does help with flexibility, it does make it to where Eliab is less protected against attacks from my hybrid Vigo. And so, if he does get hit, in which case it is worth noting that Eliab is also labeled as a primarily bipedal animal similarly to Shredder from the first round, this does make it to where a single swipe from the tail or a strong arm swipe from my hybrid Vigo would be enough to knock it out of balance, leaving it vulnerable as my hybrid proceeds to finishing him off with a bite to the neck or potentially a stomp. Now onto a better version of Eliab. Meet Apophis, a 16-ton Tyrannosaur hybrid that seems to have come out straight out of Monster Hunter, similarly to Eliab and many others that Vigo has faced as of now. Equipped with strong jaws, decorated in sharp tusks and a beak, powerful forelimbs tipped in large hooked claws, and the closest thing I've seen to a flexible version of Nodosaur armor, coupled with all the other traits that make it a very well-rounded combatant. Overall, this thing is a unit. However, it unfortunately falls as yet another victim to the theropod hybrid meta. And so, Vigo can utilize his trusty old strategy by relying on his reach to keep Apophis at bay before repositioning his body more effectively in order to confront him in a direct face-to-face confrontation, using his superior size and strength to overpower Apophis and knock him down to the ground before finishing him off with a bite to the neck or a stomp. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, the final boss. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Apex Rex XYZ 2.0. And well, looks like someone has finally learned his lesson. And about freaking time, as after weeks, if not months of me thoroughly inspecting this hybrid and even helping out with the genome alongside many other of my comrades, this hybrid has finally been perfected, so that does not include any outrageous special abilities like a paralyzing sonic roar from the lion or tiger, and not suffering from any anatomical issues like with thermoregulation. What you're looking at right now is a 16.5-ton fully functional Tyrannosaurid hybrid that, instead of following the typical theropod hybrid meta, focuses more on brute force and a balance of offense and defense that is unmatched by any other theropod hybrid that Vigo has went up against as of this moment. Coming equipped with devastating jaws, exceptionally robust forelimbs tipped in razor-sharp claws, a powerful multi-layered set of armor that covers the entirety of Apex's body, as well as the killer app in the form of large, rhino-like horns, which are useful for goring, stabbing, and taking down opponents that are larger than itself. All of this mounted on a large and muscular frame that is physically and mentally adequate for wielding these assets to their best potential, and you best believe that Apex is about to give Vigo a real run for his money. However, my hybrid is not going down without a fight, and after all, he still has the size and reach advantages on his side, and so he can quite easily keep Apex Rex at bay by simply utilizing that elongated tail of his. Now, let me take this moment to address his slight inaccuracy I may have made back in the first episode during Vigo's fight against Minos. That being that the tail smacks won't actually knock a large animal of that size out of balance. However, that tail still has another trait that still allows it to mess around with other large opponents very effectively. That being flexibility, as the crocodile monitor's contribution basically turns my hybrid's tail into a prehensile fifth limb that can be used to wrap around and grapple onto the appendages of other opponents, screwing up their combat potential big time. And in this case, and in Minos' case, my hybrid can utilize its tail to manipulate Apex Rex by its horns, wrapping around them and sending him the other way around, successfully intercepting its horn charge and saving my hybrid from the danger that those horns boast, at least partially, while also granting my hybrid enough time to reposition his body in order to face Apex head-on. And from that point, Vigo can utilize his superior size and strength to overpower Apex and knock him down to the ground. Yes, during this endeavor, Apex's sharp claws and powerful bite might potentially wound my hybrid. However, the Cayman's rapid blood clotting and pain tolerance should allow my hybrid to endure the pain long enough for him to pull off a finishing move. Now, the multi-layered armor of Apex Rex will prove very tough to penetrate. Arguably the toughest out of any armor set that Vigo had to penetrate with those jaws as of now. However, consider that my hybrid's bite is specifically designed to crush bone and armor alike and penetrate through thick layers of muscle and armor like nothing. And so, it is only a matter of time before Vigo manages to penetrate it and pull off the victory. And with that, we conclude the second episode of Imperatyrannus sanguinis versus the most powerful theropod hybrids in the Great Hybrid War. Thank you everybody so much for watching this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. And be sure to tune in next time for more hybrid content. So until then, goodbye.